Welcome back, everybody, to Quid Prog Quo, the musical podcast where I introduce my friends and loved ones to progressive rock music, and they in turn get me to listen to whatever they want. And we have another returning guest with us this week. Alicia is with us. She had me listen to Orville Peck's Pony, which I thoroughly enjoyed last time around. So the bar is set pretty high to see what kind of a game she's bringing this time. And I'm hopefully going to challenge her a little bit with this album that I've got for her. So before we dive in, I want to extend, the usual thank yous. First off to Elena Alinsky, who designed the show's graphic, as well as Explosive Ear Candy for their track Altogether Now, which is the podcast soundtrack, I suppose. So enough with the whole preamble. Well, I guess if you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. And if you're listening to this on your audio podcasting, please be sure to rate, subscribe, share this with your friends, hoping to drive up a little bit more traction this time around. So anyway, that's all the preamble for today. Let's dive in this week to find out what's in store. Yeah, luckily the YouTube doesn't give me as much, but it's like something that drives up content. So yeah. All right, cool. Well, we're back whenever we're ready.
Sorry, I was distracted by the pop-up on my screen. I am good to go.
Oh yeah, Zoom has the whole like, hey, this is actually being recorded. Do you want to leave?
This meeting is being recorded. That's nice though, like a nice security feature.
Yeah, instead of just having like the little red thing that's right up at the top. So yeah. Cool. All right. Well, welcome back and thanks for joining us again.
Thank you for having me back.
Yeah.
It's been a good few months.
It was almost a year, I think, because I think the last time we did this, it was around winter, maybe spring. So maybe like a half year.
Okay.
I can't remember.
Wow.
Time has no meaning anymore.
No, for real.
It really doesn't.
Could have been yesterday.
Do you want to give yourself a quick introduction so those who haven't seen you before?
Yeah, sure. My name is Alicia, and Michael and I used to work together at the Vaughan Public Libraries.
Hey.
And
yeah. Last time you had me listen to Pony.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago.
That was the peak of my obsession.
Yeah, some Orville Peck, and I loved it to such an extent I actually went out and bought the LP.
Yeah, I remember that. I was very proud. I'm very happy to be spreading the gospel of Orville.
Yeah, it was such a good ride, and pretty much exactly what I needed for that time too. So
yeah, I agree. It hit me the right way. I don't know why.
Yeah,
but I heard it and I was like, this is exactly what I need.
This is exactly what I need right now. So yeah, I mean, not to say that the bar is set pretty high, but
sorry. Yeah,
it'll be fine. And I think I had you listen to Efrat.
Yes.
Yeah. Any I guess residual thoughts about it now that it's had a number of months to percolate? Did you even return to it?
You know what, I'm not gonna lie, I did not, but I think we talked a bit about my music issues during quarantine, how I've sort of just been like not really listening to anything. It's been a very depressing time for me.
Yeah.
And, I just wasn't in the mood for music. It was just like podcasts and television.
Right. Has that changed? Are you back to music, or is it still just TV in the background and podcasts in the foreground?
It's not. It hasn't really come back yet. I haven't really been listening to anything new, let's say.
Okay.
It's just been like stuff I'm familiar with because I don't have to emotionally commit to it in a different way. So. Right.
This is going to be interesting because the album I've chose for you, I decided to just throw you into the deep end. So I hope that's okay.
Why not?
This is one of the, I don't want to say challenging, but it's a task.
Okay.
So what that means is the band that I have chosen for you, I'll backtrack a little bit because it's a little bit colder out, because I had this one album in mind, but I usually listen to it either in the dead of winter or the dog days of summer.
Okay.
It helped me out when I first listened to it when I was in library school and it was the dead of winter, but it has a very summery feel to it. So I like to listen to it either within the feeling that it's in or the contrast when I want that feeling. But now that it's more fall and it's finally like below 20 degrees, I'm more in a fall mood. Mm-hmm. And this is an album that I discovered when I first moved away from home and started my, I guess, the second stretch of my undergrad away from home. I moved up to Sudbury, and this album helped me out a lot while I was up there. And so it reminds me of the fall, autumn feels.
Very nice.
Yeah, so that's kind of the essence. And I was like, well, I'd rather have this fall album to really usher in a fall season. So the band is called Transatlantic.
I know Transatlantic.
You know Transatlantic?
Oh, I may be confusing them with somebody else.
Okay, tell me what you know. Tell me what you know.
Hold off on that. I'll return and see if I actually know what I'm talking about.
Okay. So Transatlantic, like, I wouldn't be surprised if you knew it, because I know that you have a little bit of a history with Dream Theater in terms of like
maybe that's why
knowing. Yeah, so Transatlantic is a super group that started in the very, very, very late 90s. Like we're looking at like 1999, 2000, that kind of era. Okay. And they were following the legacy that a lot of prog bands had in the early 80s, where a bunch of members from different progressive rock bands would come together and create these supergroups. More often than not, they were playing pop songs or like stadium rock music rather than these weird progressive rock stuff. So that's how you have bands like UK, Asia, America, like those big continent kind of things. So Transatlantic kind of did that same thing, but it had the drummer of Dream Theater, Mike Portnoy, the then singer and songwriter for Spock's Beard, the bass player from Marillion, which was like this 1980s neo-prog group, and the lead guitarist from the Flower Kings. So Flower Kings and Spock's Beard were these 90s retro prog groups, like one of the first on the scenes, that then ushered in the third and fourth wave of progressive rock music. And Mike Portnoy from Dream Theater, crazy progressive metal. They all came together and created this band. And instead of being just pop rock, stadium rock, they went like hard into the progressive rock. Okay. So their first album had a song that was like 30 minutes long. Their second album, which is my favorite, has 2 songs that are 20 minutes long, a song that's 15 minutes long. I'm giving you their third album, and it's called The Whirlwind. And why I said it's throwing you into the deep end, the album is just one song. That's on the CD. On the CD, they do break it up into chapters.
Okay.
But when they play it live and when they have it on a live album, it's literally just one song that's about 80 minutes long.
Oh, wow.
So.
Okay, that is challenging. Although I could just envision it as like just like a concept album.
Correct.
Where each song, which is broken up into smaller chunks, is just part of a larger whole. That would make it more.
And that's essentially what it is, right? And so I love it because it does kind of shift your thinking of how music is to be digested, and like instead of having them in like little bite-sized chunks in terms of singles on a album, it's just the full album. So I figured you'd be up for the task.
I'm up for anything. Give it a try. Like I said, I need something new to listen to.
Yeah. So. Yeah. And when you were saying that, you weren't really connecting with anything, you weren't emotionally invested. This was one that I found I was very connected with, especially lyrically and like musically and all that kind of stuff. So kind of hoping that tracks, but it's also one that you can throw on and listen to into the background and not really miss anything.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right.
So that's the album I have for you, The Whirlwind by Transatlantic. The only thing is you can't listen to it on streaming services.
Oh.
Which kind of sucks because Neil Morse kind of holds the rights for it, and he has his own streaming service, which is weird. But he has enough of a discography and library to make sense.
Okay.
Because he's a part of like
Tidal or something with like Jay-Z.
Exactly. This is actually Waterfall.
Oh.
Sticking with the water theme. But luckily people have uploaded it to YouTube and it's in its entirety on YouTube. So
all right.
You can find it on YouTube. But I am pretty excited to hear what you've got in store for me this time.
Yeah. So I struggled with this because I wanted to give you something that was, had some depth to it and is not just like what I'm using to get through quarantine. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I don't know that anyone has already brought this singer to the podcast. It's not, she's well known. Okay. I was going to do a Lana Del Rey album.
Yeah.
I don't know that you listen to her regularly.
I've heard a few tracks here and there, but I haven't like sat down and listened to a full album from her.
Perfect. I figured, you know what, I had one of her previous albums that I listened to like on repeat for a while. Mm-hmm. And I said, you know what, this is one that I really connected with recently, as in like the past couple of years. So I thought I would have you listen to that one. So this one is going to be called Norman fucking Rockwell.
I was going to ask if it was Norman because I've been meaning to sit down and listen to it because I've been listening to a lot of Lorde, especially with her last album, and a lot of people are like, oh, it's just like Norman fucking Rockwell.
It's sort of like Norman Rockwell light, to be honest. Lorde. Yeah. So like Lana has a more recent album, but I don't think it's as good. I feel like this previous one is her like maybe her masterpiece so far. It's so good. I hope you enjoy it.
I've heard lots of very good things about it, so I'm very excited to actually, because I listened to all of Lorde's back catalog and I'm like, they didn't really do as much as Solar Power has been doing for me. So really? Yeah, I don't know, there's something about Solar Power that really I connected with on it. So
interesting, because it's so the opposite for me.
Oh, interesting. Well, I've heard that. I've heard that most people don't like this new, well, I shouldn't say don't like, but don't feel it's as strong.
Yeah.
And I get it because it is different than her first two. But that's kind of why I like it.
I was going to say, I think because like for me, I connected so strongly with the first two. Mm-hmm. And then so the new one with a new sound, I'm kind of like, oh, this is not what we wanted. This is not what we expect from you. She can do whatever she wants, of course. Mm-hmm. But if you don't have that like high expectation, the connection to her previous stuff, you're probably going to give this one more of a fair chance than maybe I did.
Yeah, because this was my first introduction to it. So outside of like Royals, because everybody heard Royals, right?
Royals, so, yeah.
Mm-hmm. But no, so I was going to go back because everybody's like, oh, well, why would I listen to Solar Power when I can just listen to NFR like over and over and over again? I'm like, okay, well, maybe I'll go ahead and listen to that, but I just never got around to it. So this is your chance. This is a good chance for me to actually get in there and give it a good spin. Mm-hmm. Excellent. So yeah, I'll dive into some Lana Del Rey, and you can dive into some Transatlantic.
All right.
Okay. I'll see you back because I have a feeling the whirlwind is going to be a little bit longer. I'll see you.
You said it was like 80 minutes?
It is 80 minutes, yeah.
Okay, so I want to say the other one is maybe like 70-ish minutes, so I might be a little bit longer, but not.
Yeah, let's see how long it is. It is, if Spotify wants to work for me. 1 hour and 7 minutes. So yeah, it's okay. We're pretty close.
I was gonna say there is a song on that album that's like 10 minutes long, and I was like, oh, I hope Michael doesn't mind that. And now I know that you don't.
Absolutely not. The longer the better. Like Coldplay is coming out with an album that has like it finishes off with a 10-minute song, and I'm like, yes, please. Nice. So I'm very excited.
Good. You're in for a treat.
Excellent. So I'll see you back here in about 80 minutes or so.
All right.
And with that, Alicia and I go into our own music silos, she getting to dive deep into Transatlantic, some pretty hard and challenging progressive rock. I mean, I normally wouldn't throw my friends into the deep end. Sorry, my eye's a little scratchy. I wouldn't throw my friends right into the deep end like this, but I'm pretty sure she can handle it. And I am listening to Lana Del Rey. And as I mentioned, I was really excited to talk about this one. I always was looking for a chance to dive into Lana's work, and this is a perfect opportunity to do so. So I'm excited to hear what Alicia is thinking about the deep prog that is Transatlantic. And what I have to say about Lana Del Rey. But before we do, I want to thank a few of my patrons. First up is David E. Frez. David is my newest subscriber, so thank you so much, David. And I want to thank another new patron of mine, 999. 999 has subscribed to me for a few weeks now, but I wanted to give him a hearty shout out once again. So thank you, 999, as well as David. If you want to be cool like 999 and David E. Fritz, head on over to my Patreon. It's Patreon/Notes Reviews. Once again, that's Patreon/Notes Reviews. You get your name shouted out on this podcast. You get your name at the end credits of all of my YouTube videos. And yeah, it's just a good time. Depending on what you donate, you get some perks as well. Get me to review an album of your choice, listen to it live streaming, and all the good things, So I think that's about it. As I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, be sure to rate, subscribe, and like if you are watching this on YouTube. And if this is you're listening to it on a podcast, hey, I've also got this on YouTube where you can actually see my face. So yeah, but if you are a podcast individual such as myself, don't forget to share this with a friend. Let them know about this because I hope to get the word out a little bit more about this. Anyway, that's enough of me rambling on. Let's head back into the episode proper, find out what Alicia has to say about Transatlantic and what I have to say about Lana Del Rey. Let's dive back in. Yeah. Oh boy. So I'm honestly very excited to hear your thoughts about this album. And I think more so your overall experience with it, just whatever comes to. So what did you think?
I really enjoyed it. I had a great time listening to that.
I'm so pleased.
Yeah, I was I don't know. This is just for me, it's the perfect version of that kind of music. Because sometimes, I'm not going to lie to you, I find it could be tedious.
For sure.
But I think this one held my interest.
Oh, good.
And I don't know, I just really had a good time listening to it.
Oh, I'm so happy.
Yeah, thank you for the recommendation because I would not look for it myself.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I know that's part of the reason why progressive rock isn't a draw for a lot of people, because they see the run time and they get intimidated, or not even intimidated, and because that puts too much of a negative connotation on the person. But it's just I don't have time for that. Get to the point. Give me that 3-minute song. But I'm glad to hear that you didn't hate it.
Did not hate it, that's for sure. I actually liked it.
Oh, good. So what was coming? What kind of vibes were you catching?
So I have some notes that I took.
Yeah, let's do it.
I think overall, bear with me, my comparisons are going to be stupid.
That's fine.
But
no stupid comparisons. It's all good.
It reminded me of, okay, number one, obviously, I felt like I should have been watching a laser show or something. I should be smoking weed.
Okay.
That would make it a little better. No, but it reminded me of sitting in a theater, what do you call those ones that go around you?
An IMAX or an Omni theater.
The one at Ontario Place. That's what it was reminding me of.
Okay.
And so it was really cool like that. I thought if there had been a visual component that I was experiencing at the same time, it would have been, I think, even more of an impressive experience. But I think it also was giving me vibes of, and I mean, this is going to be a compliment, even if it doesn't sound like it.
Sure.
A ride, an actual amusement park ride. Let's say you're at Universal Studios, for example, that has really involving rides that take you on a journey.
Right. Yes.
It was giving me that. And I am a big amusement park fan. So that's a compliment coming from me.
Absolutely.
It just reminded me of being in a seat and a voice speaking over you. Oh. And then just going on a journey with it. So I think I don't know. I think that's why I thought it was so fun, because it was reminding me of fun experiences that I've had.
Right.
If that makes sense.
That makes total sense for sure. Yeah. Because the one thing that I love about this album in particular, in terms of progressive rock, because a lot of bands have tried these huge albums before, and I feel like this one's one of the more successful ones because of the flow of the album. The way that it goes from one movement to another, and even though this album's like 80 minutes long, it never feels the runtime.
Mm-hmm.
And I love what you said about it being like a ride, like a journey, because like the overall arching concept is, you know, life is a whirlwind. It's a massive storm, and sometimes it's easy to get through and sometimes it's very difficult to get through. And what are those touchstones that we use to ground ourselves in such a turbulent time? So I feel like roller coasters and rides are a great metaphor, because it's exactly that. Like sometimes it's terrifying, you don't know where you're going, especially those dark rides where there's so much unknown, but you always know that you're on a track going to a destination.
Exactly.
So
yeah, it definitely I think like you said, like the runtime can be sort of like a challenge for this type of music, but I think this one, the sound was broken up enough by different sort of musical components and different musical styles, I think, enough that you're kind of like, oh, what's this now? And it's sort of always catching you that way.
Yeah, there's always something interesting going on.
Yeah. Which I really enjoyed, because sometimes it'd be unexpected, like a little piano break, for example. Yeah, I really liked it.
Yeah, I also love how there's a lot of different musical themes that get reprised throughout, and that helps again with touchstones. So it's not just this chaos the entire time of we're going to this musical piece, now we're going to this musical piece. It's like, oh, I remember this. Like, it's part of the reason why a lot of and I don't mean this as a negative, but a lot of pop songs are very repetitive to get you to sing along with them on first listen. So that's kind of the same essence. It's repetitive to get you familiar when they reprise it later on. It's like, oh, I remember this, and I like how they're reprising it.
Yeah, and speaking of that, like that exact thing, is it also was reminding me of like musical theater a little bit. And so of course musical theater will do that, right? Like they'll have a reprise of a song that you've previously heard. It's like slightly different, but you're like, I know this melody. And like a musical, I think I don't know how to pronounce it. It's like leitmotif or something like that. That's like the musical cue that sort of signals when something is happening. So I was getting that from it as well. And I'm a musical theater fan, so I really like that part.
Excellent. Yeah, that was one thing that I'm shocked that more musical theater fans aren't a fan of progressive rock, because there's so much overlap.
Absolutely. I think it's what you said earlier, where it sort of seems maybe intimidating. It doesn't seem like it would have a lot in common. And so you're kind of like, I'm not getting near that. I'm not touching that. This is what I know. But then when you actually experience it, a lot of it is very similar. It's I don't know. I had some notes that were like, reminds me of like musical theater, reminds me of like theatricality, cinematic, like stuff like that. So yeah, which all speaks to me. I love that stuff. So
I'm very, very glad. What other like notes do you have on this?
They're all dumb. I will tell you this in advance.
Oh, those are the best. Come on. Those are the absolute best.
There was a specific interlude that was very haunted carnival-esque.
Okay. Yeah.
And I, again, big fan of like, you know, being in a haunted house sort of thing. But it was also sort of reminding me of what's it called? Bo Burnham's Inside.
Yes.
Like some of that was reminding me of like what he does a little bit. And maybe the dumbest note of all that I have is there was a specific part that reminded me of, okay, do you know Mario Kart, the video game?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Rainbow Road.
I
have the N64 version of this game. I don't know what it's like on any other version, but there is like a soundtrack to that specific track.
Yep.
That I was very heavily reminded of at like a specific point in the song. I wish I had taken notes of the timestamps, but
I think I know exactly the piece that you're talking about, because I mean, I grew up with the N64 and Mario Kart, and they've pretty much reused the same track for Rainbow Road, because it's almost like triggering for some people when they hear it, you know?
It's like in your brain.
It's in your brain. And for me, it's just like, okay, stay in the middle, because the moment you start to waver,
I'm always over the side. Like, I don't know how it happens. But
Oh boy. But yeah, I know, I pretty much know exactly the motif that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could hear it now that you've pointed it out. I'm like, oh yeah, that's kind of where it's from. Yeah.
It took me like I was listening to it and I'm like, this is reminding me of something. What is it? I'm thinking it's another rock song. It's a something, maybe a musical. And I'm like, oh, no,
it's Mario Kart.
It's Rainbow Road. It's Nintendo.
Oh geez, that's good.
Again, all of this in the best way because these are all things that I love. So I was happy to be reminded of them.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm super stoked that you actually like enjoyed it, because I mean, there was a moment that I'm like, oh, I don't know if I should do this. It might be a little too much to ask all at once, but no, you've kind of validated my choice. So
yeah, no, I really liked it. And like, again, like if you had given me just like an album that was not one song, it would possibly be the same runtime. It's the same commitment, right? And
yeah, like I remember talking to somebody about these longer stretches of songs, and they said, oh, I don't know how musicians can play for that long. And I said, well, if you know, they go through different moods, right? So nobody's really playing 100% of the time. So it would be akin to being at a live show and just watching a really long set. Like the drummer's not playing all the time, the keyboardist isn't playing the entire time, they're not singing the entire time, so you use those breaks to take a little bit of a breather, as you would if you were between songs. So
exactly. Yeah. I did have a thought of like, how do musicians come up with a concept like this and sustain it for that long? That's impressive to me.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you say that, because like this album does have many different concepts, but I think the main concept is one that one of the main forces of this album is Neil Morse, who does a lot of these big concept albums. And at the end of the day, the concepts usually revolve around his relationship with God, which is why there's so much homage and images of humanity's relationship to God and their deities and that kind of stuff, and how at the heart of the whirlwind is essentially God's love for us. And a lot of his, I guess, solo works is much more direct. There's less hidden homages and allusions, and much more God is great, God is love, and all that. So I think they are very good at constructing a concept because he's just so used to it.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I was definitely picking up on some of those themes as well.
Yeah, and I know that it turns off a few of like progressive rock fans, and they don't like Neil Morse because of how religious his music can get at times. Like if there was ever a Christian progressive rock artist, he would be the standard person. Yeah, and I mean, it does get a bit much on his solo stuff, but I find that bands that he's worked with, it's always there, but it's not as in your face. So
yeah. Okay. Yeah, I don't mind a little bit of that. I don't think I could listen to like a full album of, talking about God or anything. That's not my jam.
I was going to say, just wait until I give you like Sola Scriptura or like One or something like that, where it's nothing but God.
Oh, you know what? If it sounds good, like I'll listen to it, because I do listen to some musicians who are maybe a bit more on the religious side, but if you approach it in I'm into like spirituality and stuff like that. So I'm interested in what they have to say.
Oh, absolutely. Like, and this is a little bit of an aside, but like the church that my dad and my stepmom go to now is a Baptist church, and I'll visit them and go just for the music itself, because it's always this big crescendo moment, and it's very like starts off slow with an acoustic guitar and then builds to this grand climb, and then I always say people are high-fiving the angels because their hands go up in the air.
Yeah, Baptist churches are fun, right?
They're great. So like I feel that same kind of energy here. So
yeah, like a celebration sort of, or it's an approachable for an outsider to be listening to it and not feel like ugh.
And I'm glad that you said celebration, because that's one of the things that I always say about this style of progressive rock, because this was released in like 2008, 2009, where progressive rock and music as a whole was very dark, very brooding, like emo and screamo and
that was
hard
at that time.
Yeah, like everything was dark. Everything was like the dark,
the better.
Yeah, the Dark Knight was coming out, and it's like, this is what we want in our superheroes, dark and brooding,
Oh yeah.
And here comes this and I always say celebration of sound, the celebration of music, where they're unabashedly happy about things and like, hey, life can get you down, but just keep on trucking. And it's such a like a counterculture that it's so much more bright based on all the music that was going around at that time, where it's just like darkness, brooding.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I remember those days well. But yeah, that's interesting, and I feel like maybe because of that, it might have even aged better than what I was listening to at that time, for example.
Yeah.
Which, like, as when I'm no longer a teenager, I'm like, that is stuff I can't, it's borderline unbearable now. But yeah, it spoke to me as a teen, but maybe not now. But and just like what the world needs at this given time, for example, maybe we would turn to this kind of music a little bit more.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you say that too, because like I remember reading somewhere that in like times of hardship, the media that's being produced are always optimistic, always happy, always very light and again celebratory. And then times of prosperity, the media that's being produced, the art that's being produced is a lot more brooding, a lot more introspective, a lot more I guess self-critical. And if we look at, now versus then, like that's what, 13, 14 years ago, around there.
Yeah.
But like we were just coming out of the economic slump. I think, oh man, Barack Obama was just elected president. Bush was coming out in the US. Things were starting to look very bright in a lot of different ways. And so that allowed a lot of people to do more of that introspective stuff. Whereas now things aren't great.
No. I think it's the same reason that like I think romantic comedies in like book form especially have never been more popular than now. And I think people are like, give me something easy, give me something good. I need to see something happy.
Yeah.
Whereas like I feel like in the 90s, which was like a relatively prosperous and like easy time from what I remember as a child, it was like I was obsessed with like Daria. And like, oh, the world sucks, everything's terrible, and it's like the world was fine, what are you talking about?
What are you talking about?
Bad now.
Somebody was even saying like the winners of best picture between like 1999 and 2000 and then like 2001 and 2002, and it's like we went from this American Beauty, Fight Club, very dark, very critical, very over analyzing, to like Shrek and very like How to Train Your Dragon and like very happy and more celebratory kind of stories.
Yeah, for sure. It weirdly makes sense, because I think if the world is going okay, you have enough space mentally to like, let's examine the darker side of things and like let's dig into that a little bit. When a pandemic is happening, you're like, I've had enough darkness shoved in my face. I want something nice.
Yep. We went from like pre-pandemic to so many different like true crimes and all those, all the way into like the first big thing after the pandemic, or I guess during the pandemic, which was like Tiger King and things like that, where it was just like, give me something light and just insane.
Just the crazier the better.
The crazier the better. Let's keep this all light. Let's keep this all like kind of borderline silly.
And like nothing to do with me, like that. I don't know what is going on in Tiger King, but I'm enjoying it.
Oh boy. So I guess switching gears entirely.
Yes, quite different. Sorry. I mean,
no, it's great. Much like you, I found myself loving and digging this. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I feel like what Lana was doing was like, I would have loved this album even more if I had listened to it last year, because like that was when I was really getting into Taylor Swift's double album of like Folklore and Evermore. And this sounds like the more realized version of what Taylor was going after for those two albums. I wrote down notes for pretty much every track, which is rare because most of the time I'll write down like one or two. But I had something to say about everything. Overarching across the album, I love that Lana gave each track space to do what it's meant to do, and she didn't allow the track to have an easy out. And I don't know if that makes sense.
What do you mean?
So I find, especially with Americana music and folk music, and I don't mean this as a negative, I mean this more as a descriptor, the artists take the easy out of when they feel like the song is done, they just stop it.
Okay.
Instead of allowing the song to give the song its due to have a proper ending, like serving the song to the point of reaching the logical conclusion rather than, okay, I've said what I need to say, I'm done.
I'm at the 3-minute mark.
Yeah.
End it. Okay.
Yeah. And it's not even like a runtime thing. It's more of just like a feel. Okay. And this was something that I noticed a lot in the 80s. It was very prevalent in the early 2000s as well, of like the fade out of a track instead of, again, playing it out to its logical conclusion. And I think, what was the track that I wrote it down that I was almost halfway in, if not more so, that I was like, all these songs are getting the proper due. I want to say it was California.
Okay.
Somewhere around California. I was just like, yeah, all these tracks are really getting due process instead of just, again, taking the easy out of okay, I'm done. We're on the third chorus. Let's cut it. Yeah.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I wouldn't have thought that, but now that you say it, I know what you mean.
Yeah, it's one that you kind of have to explain a little bit more to kind of, but once you get it, yeah. I also thought it was a very bold choice of Lana's to have the long track be the third track in.
Yeah, it's an interesting choice for sure. I don't really know much about her process, or I feel like she's a very mysterious figure in a lot of ways. So I'm kind of like, what are you up to? Like, what's the rationale behind this particular track list, or even this sound that you're doing now versus what you've done before? But yeah, she's like, you know what? Here's a long song. Deal with it.
Deal with it. Yeah. Yeah. And it even works in the flow of the album, because it was a very big trend in the later 2000s of putting the big 20-minute song in the midpoint of the album. And it always disrupted the flow of the album. A lot of prog bands would put their big epic song either at the very beginning, like the first track, or the very end being the last track. And they had to do that through necessity, because the only way to produce music was on records. So the 20-minute track would take up the entire side. So if you put, 2 5-minute tracks, then a 20-minute track, and then another 2-minute 5-minute tracks, or I guess 2 5-minute tracks, there would be no way to split it properly across
physically
a physical album,
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, so there was a big thing in the later 2000s to just put the big 20-minute track right in the middle. And it always disrupted the flow. But I felt like on this album, having it wasn't necessarily in the middle, it was still kind of at the beginning of the album, but it never really disrupted the flow. It kept the flow going. Even though I do feel like F It, I Love You was a little bit of a hard transition from Venice Bitch, which is the big track. And I don't know if it just needed a little bit more padding, a little bit more space between the tracks, because when Venice Bitch, when it stops, it almost immediately goes into Fuck It, I Love You.
Yeah. Interestingly, I do remember, I'm trying to recall the time, but Venice Bitch, I think, was released as a single well before this album was even a thing. And she included it on the album. So I do think that one maybe is a little bit of an outlier. In my opinion, anyway. Whenever I listen to the album, that one always reminds me that this was not originally part of a whole album. It was its own thing. Which is why it's so long, I think, compared to the other ones. So yeah, so putting it in the middle is, or not in the middle, but like not at the beginning or the end, like you said, is an interesting choice because
Yeah.
conceptually, I don't know what the idea was anyway.
Yeah, because I know like a lot of contemporary artists either put their big track at the beginning or at the end. More often than not, it's at the end. But like a few bands, like I know King Gizzard has put out a number of tracks that are longer right at the beginning. But more often than not, it's the ending piece to kind of finalize the album. But it also doesn't feel like a conclusion. It also feels just like a continuation. So it makes sense a little bit why it's not at the very end, but it was just, that was my big note of that, was that it was just very bold of her to put the plus 9 minute track 3 songs in, rather than a little bit later on, or even just right at the very beginning. But I also love, and this is something across all the tracks, and part of the reason why I say give the tracks their dues and not giving the easy way out. I love all the builds. How well these tracks are constructed, in all of them having a very satisfying crescendo. So it's not just going through a piece very, I guess, smoothly, even though a lot of these tracks are very mellow. They all have this climb to some kind of a plateau or some kind of a higher valley.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to again, I don't think I ever like would have noticed that, because I think a lot of songs are just like structured that way to begin with. But yeah, I'll say that like you said, a lot of them are very, very mellow. And a lot of the time that can bore me. Like that was maybe my going back to Lord, I think that was my issue with Solar Power.
Right.
Is that it was mellow to the point where I was like, give me something.
Right.
But I think they're all mellow, but they're all unique enough from each other that you're like, okay, this is a mellow in a different way.
Yeah.
And you're giving me a different feeling with this one. And I think that's what really makes it work.
Yeah, I always equate to like, if we're going for rides again, I feel like
my favorite analogy,
right? I feel like Lord's album is drifting along a lazy river.
Absolutely.
And this one is more going along kind of like a fun water slide where you're not quite sure where the twists and turns are going to lead you.
Like it's still floating on water, but there's a little bit more happening. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And you've got like these plunges that sometimes are more fearful than others, and you don't know when those are going to happen. So like that was something that I wrote throughout, very drifting. There's a lot of homages and allusions to water and being on the water. And where was the one that I had written down? There's a really beautiful blending, and this was something that I noted on a number of tracks. Doing Time was one that I had wrote it down on. Happiness is a Butterfly, and a few others, where there's a great blending of acoustic sounds with more electronic sounds, like it's almost like an electronic dance. The other one was Cinnamon Girl. That there's this blending, and I find sometimes when you try to blend these counter sounds, it doesn't work all that well. It's like they should have chosen one and stuck to it. But I feel here it's a very nice blending of sounds.
It's not just like, I think the album gives the impression of being maybe like on the more acoustic side, but when you actually listen to it, there's actually a lot of electronic sound behind it, which I thought was really interesting. It gives it a little bit of like a different edge to it.
I know that there was a few lyrics that I also wrote down. I know on California, Catch You on the Flip Side is something that my friends and I always tell to one another, which I thought was very nice.
I think California is such a beautiful song, like just like all around. It's the lyrics are like just so heartfelt and honest.
Yeah, absolutely. The one that I loved the most was The Mariner's Apartment Complex. The lyric that I wrote down was mistook my kindness for a weakness. I was just like, oh man, because like I feel that very much. Like I know that, especially within my family, they always look down on me of like, oh, you need to be rough and tumble and you got to be more rah, rah, rah. And I'm like,
Family. Yeah.
yeah. And I'm like,
Definitely.
yeah. And it's like, oh, your kindness is a weakness. And I'm like, no, I like to think of it as like a strength, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
she also says on that song, like, I ain't no candle in the wind.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I may seem soft and everyone thinks that I'm soft, but I'm not. Like, just because I may appear that way, don't get it twisted.
Yeah, don't get it twisted around. Like, I'm still going to like stand my guard, but
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
yeah.
Hmm.
The harmonies also were ridiculous. Like,
Hmm.
she's such a skillful artist in knowing how to construct different harmonies. Because I had that on California, I had that on The Next Best American Record.
Hmm.
And I know that there was the overall feeling was, have you listened to any Decemberist albums?
Hmm.
It felt like a lot of their
Oh, sorry. No, I
I'll
was
go
gonna say
for it.
I was supposed to see them in concert last August, and then
Same
this
here.
August. Yeah, you were gonna go?
Yep,
Cancel.
canceled.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
that's over.
no, yeah, there's no. I was very saddened because I was going to take
Yeah.
one of my best friends, and yeah.
Mhm. Oh
Um,
well,
oh
COVID.
well, next
Yeah.
time,
Next time.
next
Anyway.
time. Um, I kept getting feels of some of their smaller moments on like their first couple of albums where they
Yeah.
were really well at orchestrating these smaller, more intimate pieces. And I felt like this captured a lot of that. And I actually
Mhm.
wrote it down for one track. And of course, I can't find it in my notes because I have too much notes. Um, it's somewhere here, wherever it is. Because I actually wrote down, oh, it reminds me of, oh, I think it was Venice Bitch.
Okay.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
soft, very sweet,
Very soft.
but very satisfying. It reminds me of the softer moments from Decemberist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think intimate is a good word just for the album as a whole. It almost
Absolutely.
it sounds like she's singing to herself almost, and you're just kind of there.
Yeah. Yeah, I can get that, especially with some of the lyrical content, like the first track, the title track, where she's both reflecting on why she's being drawn to this man child.
Mm.
And it's almost being like not necessarily scorning herself, but like very, very softly questioning, like, what is it about these kind of
Hmm.
men? Like they're not mature, they're not what I'm really looking for. And I mean, why are guys like that? Because most of them are. Um, and so it's less of her, I guess, asking everybody, but more of just like an intimate reflection for herself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what the vibe that I get from almost all of it, I think, where it's
Mm-hmm.
sort of she's like, I'm just thinking out loud. These are my
Yeah.
thoughts. You're
Yeah.
listening to them, but like it's not really like you're not the point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's almost like the train of thought writing styles of,
Hmm.
um, it's both very deep, but also not very polished, which creates this more real aspect to it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the only other notes, because I could talk quite a while on all this. I love that she shoots or shots fired on the greatest. I love where she says, miss doing nothing at all
Mhm.
for the most, or sorry, I miss doing nothing for the most of all. Wow, let me try that again. The lyric, I believe, was, I miss doing nothing the most of all.
Yeah.
And I feel like once within the pandemic, things started opening back up again, I really resonated with that.
Yeah.
I was like,
I'm feeling that this weekend.
yeah, it's like, we're still kind of in a major pandemic. Like and we're expected to continue carrying on. Like,
Yeah. It was a weird sort of it was obviously a terrible situation all
mhm,
over the world, but the if
absolutely.
we're going to look at an upside to the situation we were put through, would be like a break from everything. Like I remember the weekend would
Hmm,
roll around and it was just another day, and I'm like, oh, I don't have to be like open to a million different invitations,
yeah.
or not that I'm getting a million invitations, but like you know what I mean? Just like not worrying
Yeah.
about like, okay, what am I doing today? What am I doing tomorrow? What am I doing? It's like, okay, breathe.
Breathe.
Just another day of doing whatever.
Yeah.
Nothing,
We can do a whole lot of nothing at all.
Yeah. And obviously that became too much.
Yes. Yeah, because as we started getting back into the groove of things, you're like, oh boy, that's but yeah, I also had notes on that track of shots fired at Kanye, which I thought
that's
was
what
really
I knew you were
good.
gonna say.
Well, he deserves it. So there you
go.
Yeah, and I love also how the album ends with Happiness is a Butterfly, and the monster of a track name, Hope is a dangerous thing for a woman like me to have, but I still have it, which I think is very potent. And that was my last note, was just how potent that all is.
Especially having that right at the end. I feel like that's like a final note, right?
Yeah.
I think like whenever I listen to the album, I feel like musically the greatest would be a good finale song, because it's the most rousing. I think it's the most, I mean, from what I remember, but like it just seems like a final note where she's saying all like, you know, the world is ending, it's crazy. If this is it, like I've had a ball, I think she says.
Yeah.
So that sounds like an ending song, but then there's more songs to come. So it's interesting that the message that I think she's sending with ending on Hope is a dangerous thing.
Yeah. And Happiness is a Butterfly and Hope is a dangerous thing, like both very complementary ideas. And I even wrote that Happiness is a Butterfly might be my favorite track off of the whole album.
You know what? I think that one is the most critically praised.
Interesting.
But it's not one of my favorites. Obviously I like it, but it's not one that I would have picked as like my top 5 even. But I think I'm alone. I think I'm unusual in that. I think a lot of people said it's their favorite.
Which I see why. And I also see why it wouldn't be a favorite. Like I just put that it had this like early Radiohead feel to it. Like I'm thinking of like Fake Plastic Trees kind of a feel to it. So I could see the appeal, but I also see if that's not quite your jam, how it might not necessarily be.
Like it's just like I like it, but it's just not one that stood out to me as much as the other ones, which is funny. When I was reading reviews of it back in the day when it came out, everyone was like, oh, Happiness is a Butterfly is, you know, the song.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And like I wouldn't say like, because I enjoyed this album through and through, like my enjoyment of Happiness is a Butterfly isn't like leaps and bounds beyond everything else. It's just like my enjoyment is through here, and it's like just a little bit, just a little bit, right?
A little higher.
So, a little higher. So
no, fair enough. It's a good song.
Yeah. But thanks for not forcing me, but recommending this album to me, because like I found myself having a ball, especially like listening to a lot of these like the same artists. Like getting so much into the Lorde album. I've been listening a lot to nope, all the different names are gone now. They're all gone. But yeah, like getting me to listen to that, I had a fantastic time.
Oh, good. I'm glad. And I hope maybe it'll like, now that if you go back and listen to Lorde a little bit more, I wonder if there'll be some similarities. They are produced by the same guy. And I think a lot of people are putting the blame on him, which I don't know how fair that is, but
yeah. I mean, I always say like a producer takes the raw material that the artist brings and just refines it. So it's not like they're drastically changing or influencing all that much. It just takes the raw form and like refines it. So and who knows, like producers are also attracted to a certain sound, so it's kind of a chicken and egg, cart and horse conundrum.
That makes sense. And I feel like his music as well, like it's Jack Antonoff from the Bleachers.
Oh, okay.
So,
that makes sense.
So if you listen to his own music, you're like, all right, I see the connections.
I see where this is all coming from.
We're all related. Yeah. To me, I like it. I like the sound, so it's not a problem. But
I like I said, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I feel like this is going to be a very heavily rotated fall album for me.
That's interesting. So actually, I was gonna say, when you were mentioning that the song you gave me was more of a fall album, that was one of my notes as well. I do really hear like fall sounds. But to me, Lana Del Rey is always summer. Like,
and I totally see that, like the Americana feel, like driving
the
a car.
Hamptons, California.
Absolutely. Like driving through the California like landscape, either like the desert or the mountains or the coastline in like a convertible with your hair just flying out the back.
Exactly. Yeah. Whenever the weather gets hot, I'm like, okay, time to put Lana on again.
No, I can hear that. I think what makes this more of a fall album for me is just how mellow it is, and some of the darker corners are reminding me of the days are getting a little bit shorter. There's a little bit of a crispness in the air. It's not as ridiculously hot as it once was. So I'm thinking more of like the evening drives,
Yeah. Oh yeah, I definitely see this one being a good like fall transition album. Yeah, for sure. I'll definitely be listening to it in the fall. So
perfect. Yeah. Well, I think we have 2 wins for sure on this one. Yeah. Excellent. Is there anything as we say our goodbyes? Is there anything that you want to let the listeners know about? Anything you want to promote?
I don't do too much aside from my grad program anymore. If anyone is interested in reading pop culture stuff, I write for the Vaughan Public Library's blog called Hot Off the Shelf.
It's very good. I've been following it, and oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's very, very good. Very insightful for sure.
Yeah, we have fun with it. So if you're interested in hot takes on pop culture, they're not always hot takes.
I was going to say they're the spiciest of takes.
Yeah, that's about it. It's called Hot Off the Shelf. We changed the name.
Oh, did you? That's right.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Well, that's great. Thank you so much for coming on board.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Having a little bit of a colliding of different worlds, but that's what I love about this podcast and what I love about this whole thing. So thanks for coming on, and thank you all for watching and listening, and as always, just keep sharing music.